What's going on, man? You wanted to have a conversation?
I'm doing great. Sure. I wasn't planning on anything tonight, but
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
I
I
can
don't
just
know.
roll with it.
They told me that you wanted to have a conversation that you were in here, so I was like, okay, no problem. So I figured, sure. What do you got? So what do you got for me? What do you want to talk about?
Um, well, I just wrote an article that's it's not published yet. It will be published like later this week, I guess,
Hmm.
on COVID lockdowns.
Okay.
And I was wondering what you feel about COVID lockdowns.
I mean, I'm fine with COVID lockdowns. I think that they're overall a positive thing. I'm assuming you're not a particular
Oh,
fan of it.
no.
No.
So, to what extent would you support a lockdown?
Um. Let's see. So in New York, I think right now we have a 10 o'clock. I guess you'd call it a curfew, and then you have like a mask mandate, and you're encouraged to social distance. And then I think that there's also like I think it's like 50% capacity. I don't know if it's what the exact capacity is, but there's some limited capacity, especially in non-essential businesses. So yeah, I'm pretty much fine with whatever New York's doing. I don't really see it as too much of a hindrance. The only thing that's a little annoying on a personal level is that like you have to wear a mask in the gyms, but it is what it is.
Hmm.
So I'm pretty much
Yeah,
fine with it.
so I've done a lot of research on it and I found a lot of different things.
Hmm.
And one thing would be because of people stuck at home, because they can't go to their job, they can't go here, they can't go there, they can't go to school. There's a huge increase in people feeling suicidal and actual suicides in general. In some places, they saw as much as 8,000% rise in calls to suicide hotlines, especially like in California where there was worse lockdowns.
Yeah, right. Okay.
And for like suicidal thoughts, someone like contemplating suicide, it used to
Hmm.
be 6 to 11% of adults from 18 to 25
Hmm.
within a well, not 6 month, a 12-month period would have some sort of contemplation of suicide. And then that number spiked to 25.5%
Hmm.
within 30 days. So that's a
So it went
huge
from eight.
spike.
What,
And,
we went from about 10% to like 25%.
yeah, about it's usually around 6
From
to
18 to
11%.
25.
Yeah.
Do you have any statistics on people that aren't 18 to 25, like the demographics outside of that?
Um, uh, Probably I could find that. That was just like the main one I saw. I have like the CDC link. I have it in my article, definitely,
Mhm. Oh no, I believe what you're saying. Like
which
I'm
has been
not.
published.
I'm
But
just. I'm only curious because like 1825 it's far from like the overall people or the overall like everybody. I don't even know what
yeah,
percentage
yeah,
of the
that's just like
population would be that.
I think that's just the general age group that's the most
Yeah.
suicidal.
I mean, I know that kids on and like especially kids in high school or not even high school, like any what would you call it the whatever any K through 12, they're struggling, or I guess not K, but like they're struggling just to do online
Yeah,
courses because they really just it's not. I don't think that they've gotten anywhere close to perfecting it. I think teachers are probably over prescribing homework, and then kids also they just don't know how to act by themselves and actually commit to classes because they're not in a particular space to actually want to do work. So
yeah, the CDC and UNICEF and Lancet and other places issued statements on like the danger right now of
mhm.
children and suicide. So that's definitely an issue. I just don't think we have a lot of hard data on that. That's just harder data to get. Like we do know what's happening. We have individual stories. All the first suicide that was really public was a kid named Hayden, and he
Mhm.
was 12, and that was way back at the beginning, and it was just like 2 weeks of
What
lockdown for him.
when was it? Yeah, so I would say that there has to be something else other than a lockdown. If it only took him 2 weeks to take his own life, I mean, there must have been something going on at home. I would just
Yeah, I think
assume. I
his
would assume, yeah.
let me see if I can find it. Hayden COVID suicide. I think that it was his parents were still able to go to work and stuff, and he was like an only child.
Hmm.
So he was just like stuck alone. He wasn't able to be around any of his friends.
Yeah. All right. So
And
yeah, I would say he clearly had something else going on. Like he clearly had like an additional, some kind of depression or something. Because I don't think any normal kid, even if they're lonely after 2 weeks, would take their own life. I mean, it obviously lockdown exacerbates an already like big issue, and that is like a higher. I would say that we have higher
yeah, I mean
depression
that's
rates over
definitely not.
kids nowadays.
Yeah, that's definitely not super normal. Like he
Oh
was
yeah.
either like way too sheltered, or there was something there already.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. But like, I
yeah,
mean,
like
there's an argument to be
you
made that
really don't know.
like I said, it exacerbates already existing problems, which is like a definitely an
Yeah,
argument to make for sure. Especially since we have a lot of depressed kids nowadays, as
yeah,
compared to
definitely.
the way it used to be.
Yeah, the Gen Z suicide rate's been rising up for a bit, and I think it's supposed to surpass millennials pretty soon.
Really, Jesus Christ.
Yeah,
What was it before the
pretty big
coronavirus?
mess.
Was it already or if you don't know, you don't have to we don't have to go into it too much. But
I
was
know it
it
was
was it
already getting
higher?
bad before the coronavirus.
Oh, so it was already higher. Yeah, Gen Z is very sensitive.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely too
Yep.
sensitive. Why do you think it is? Too many LGBT people? I'm
I
just
actually made
I'm
it.
just kidding.
That's funny because I made a joke about that like way back before like the COVID and stuff. Because I remember it was like way back when I started my account, and I made a video about like on my first account about like the suicide rates in Gen Z.
Mhm.
And I had this article, and then I saw this other article that said like Gen Z has the most LGBT people, and I was like, oh look, this shows why.
Yeah,
And it was just a
I
joke,
would
but
say
that's just kind of funny you brought that up.
no.
I
Yeah,
mean, maybe there is some sort of
I
correlation
don't I
there,
don't think it's
but
LGBT
oh,
people. I think it's like identifying as LGBT. Like, because there's a lot of people I think that are just like especially neo-pronoun type people that are just like identifying just to fit in with something, and to seem
mhm.
cool and to like have an identity. So I would say those people are just sensitive in general. Like trenders type people, they're just sensitive in general because they're just looking for some form of attention, and like they
Mhm.
I would say that's what it is, but it's all speculation.
Yeah, there's several things that go into it, I'm sure. Like one thing would be the whole gun scare, like people just telling kids they should be terrified for their lives every time they go to school
True.
because they're going to be shot, even though it's more likely they're going to be struck by lightning. Significantly more likely they're
No,
going
I
to be
understand
struck
what
by
you're saying.
lightning.
Yeah, no, like but the reality is that you're very not very likely to have an issue when it comes to school shootings in general. But it's
Yeah.
still a sensitive topic. But yeah, no, definitely a lot of scares going on with the media in general, and everything's hyped up with Donald Trump going on.
Mhm.
You
They
know,
got like the global warming stuff as well. That also contributes to it, I
think
think.
you think so?
Yeah, just like because most people you talk to don't really know much about it. They
Hmm.
just know some stuff they hear, like the Earth is going to end in 12 years, something
Oh
like
yeah,
that,
like the 2030
right?
projections. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, which it wasn't even an accurate. That
No,
wasn't even like what the scientists actually said. They just said, within
no,
12 years
that's
we're
what
not going to be able to
AOC
reverse
said.
this certain thing. Yeah,
That's what AOC had said.
yeah.
I
So
don't.
now there's a bunch of people who actually think that, and that definitely contributes to all the dread stuff like that. So you
Probably,
got the
absolutely.
sensitivity, you got the dread of global warming, you got the dread of guns, and all this stuff just kind of piles up. And then just how conflicted Gen Z is. Like you can get like some old boomers together, and like these guys like Biden and these guys like Trump, and they're not even going to talk about politics the whole time, and they're just fine, right? But then you got Gen Z people who are like, oh no, this guy likes Trump. He is a Nazi. He wants me dead. And then this guy likes Biden. He wants to take all my money or whatever. It's just like all this conflict within Gen Z, and I think there's just seems to be a lot more conflict than with other generations.
Yeah, probably. I mean, you're being told nowadays that like politics aren't about like opinions anymore. It's about like a life or death for like people. It's a little silly, but
Yeah.
so back to the coronavirus. Do you what do you think? What do you think your solution is? Do you think that we should completely abolish like lockdowns?
I think we shouldn't have lockdowns. Yes, I'm a minarchist, a libertarian, so I'm for
Hmm.
the only real roles the government playing is courts, military, and police.
Hmm.
So in general, I don't want the government involved in this stuff. But I think that, as a country, as people, we should mostly focus on protecting the vulnerable people because like more people over 64 have died than anyone else under, and more people over 85 have died than almost everyone else. It's
Well,
like over
then we don't have to pay as
70,000
much for
people.
Social Security. I mean, win-win, right?
Yeah, there you go. It's just saving us money,
So
except for all the stimulus checks and everything.
yeah, right. But how would you? So right. So without a lockdown, how would we do that?
So that's just government lockdown. So you can
Mhm.
still have lockdowns. You know, you got nursing homes and stuff like that, which the government didn't really do a great job with that either. You know, you had like Andrew Cuomo, who sent in all these infected patients into nursing homes and made things worse and caused, I think it was like what, 6,000 deaths just from that.
Mhm.
And I think there was one other governor who did a very similar thing. So, like, these are the people who are absolutely the most vulnerable. Like, the data overwhelmingly shows this. You just look at the age groups of people who die from corona,
Mhm.
it's mostly people over 85. So, you know, like, don't be sending in people who are infected into nursing homes. Uh, be careful about visitations. You know, like, I don't think we should seal off these people because, you know, they have to face depression too. I mean, that you may not think about that with someone who's 85 years old because maybe they're not going to talk about it as much, but they still have feelings too. You know, you don't want to lock them away from their families, but you know,
Sure,
if the
yeah.
family comes to visit, you can test them, you can have a certain amount of social
So
distancing.
would
The
you
most
be, I
important
guess,
thing, washing hands.
would you be in favor? I think they have rapid testing now. Is that what you're saying? Like implement rapid testing at these nursing homes to see if these kids can actually go
Yeah,
inside. Do you know the
yeah.
effectiveness rate of a rapid test is?
I think it's like I think it's like 8% are bad. Like 8% are bad. You
That's
know,
not
they're
terrible.
not accurate.
Yeah, it's not that bad.
I was looking at different types of tests, and I just know one was 8%, one was like 20%. I mean, in general, they're
Right.
not horrible.
So when it comes to the lockdowns in general, like what is it specifically about the lockdowns that you don't like? Is it yeah, what is it specifically? Because we only touched on like the hypocrisy of a lot of like especially
Mhm.
Democrats, and I've seen stuff about it before. But what is it specifically you don't like about it?
I think one of the primary things is the excess deaths. So, like I said, you have these vulnerable people, and we're mostly protecting them because these are mostly the people that are gonna die.
Mhm.
And then now over here, we're causing all these kids who are almost at no risk at all from corona.
Mhm.
Like it's been a small handful of kids that have died from corona,
Mhm.
and we're pushing them into depression, into suicide, into poverty.
Well, what
I don't
so
I
would
don't
you be
remember
okay
off the
with?
top of my head.
Yeah, right. So the aspect of the aspect you don't like is it schools being locked down? Like, would you be for opening the reopening of schools?
Oh
Because
yeah,
that
schools is like I'm
because
definitely
that's
for
probably where I
reopening
would
of
imagine that's
schools.
where everything comes from is schooling, and you that's something where like I could concede to the idea of like a reduction in lockdowns. I'd still be for the 10 o'clock curfew. Honestly, I think people party a lot more after 10, and that's where you kind of have like a rapid spread. But like to the depressed kids, I would say like it's almost something where because that's basically what you seem to focus on, and I would as well. I don't know that opening up schools would necessarily be a good idea because those, I mean, kids in general are disgusting, and I could definitely see it spreading worse in general. But I mean, maybe. I mean, I guess if you did it right, but kids aren't going to wear a mask all
Yeah,
day.
I mean, I would agree to an extent it would spread worse, but I think ultimately you would get less deaths. And I
Mhm.
think like I have this view. I
Well,
think
do you
most
think
people
you'd get
have this
less?
view as
Because I know
well.
people. Well, hold on, I know people are more suicidal. They're more depressed, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're killing themselves or at a greater rate than like any projected rate of death if we allowed it to spread even more greatly. So I don't know if less. I don't know if you could make that claim for sure that we would have less deaths overall with the coronavirus. I think that's a
Yeah,
sweeping
it's definitely
generalization.
hard to make like absolute
Yeah, I
claims
would
like that.
imagine we
I know like
wouldn't.
there was estimates like that it would be a total of like 75,000 deaths from like suicide, alcoholism, drug
Hmm.
overdoses, stuff like that. Stuff that has to do with like despair or depression.
Hmm.
You're either doing something to yourself or you're not taking care of yourself because of this reason. And it was like 75,000.
Hmm. Is that just right? Is that additional or is that cumulative?
That's excess deaths. So like that's like all these deaths as a result of lockdowns or some sort of
Wait,
COVID
are you?
related thing.
Oh, so you're saying that there would be
Like
75,000 excess deaths, or what is your statistic related to people dying? Because you just mentioned alcoholism and whatnot. From so is that
so
yeah? So were you saying that there would be 75,000 people in general, like dying from alcoholism or some form of depression?
Yeah, so it would be as in an excess death, that would be like an excess as compared to like other years. So like last year we had,
Right. So
let's say we
specifically in
had
the
like
realm of like,
50,000 people
mhm.
who died because of these things. Now we have an extra 75,000 as a result of things that happened with COVID.
Right. Well, with COVID though, so that's what. So like, is it with COVID or because of the depression? Because that if it's with COVID, if that's a pretty
Oh no, it's
drastic
not with
increase.
COVID. It's like it's just as a result. It's because these are deaths specifically for despair and depression.
Because
Because
it's
you
not
can go through like lots of other excess deaths
right.
that might happen because of like I wasn't able to get my cancer screening or whatever. This is
Sure.
specifically for depression and despair.
Okay, so you're saying that there will be specifically 75,000 excess deaths. Can you send me a link for that?
Yeah, sure.
Uh,
Can I send you stuff on
oh yeah, I fucking
the
forgot.
Discord now?
Let me just add. Let me just add you as a friend on Discord. Let's see. Yeah, go ahead. You should be able to DM me now. I think you just have to add me back on Discord.
Let's see. Here we go. I'll just send this one. And I've got the original study here as well, but I think this links to it. Oh, that didn't go.
Yeah, just right click on my name in here and then hit add friend, and then you should be able to send me what you need to send me.
Okay. Let's try it now.
There you go.
So yeah, in general, I just have a view on morality that it's better to not save someone than to cause someone's death. Like I think both are tragic, but if you have a choice between the two, I think it's better to not save someone. And I think, there could be a possibility that we are causing more deaths ultimately, which, that's not possible to prove for sure.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any because
But
what
either
I
way,
yeah, because when we have to compare that to the projection of people dying due to not being due to like completely opening up. And I also know that that's from my understanding is there are studies that show that there are people who have like long lasting issues when it comes to having the coronavirus. Um yeah, no, it makes sense. I would argue because I mean I think at this point we're arguing two poor solutions. I mean let's be honest here. Whether you lock down or you don't, people are going to die. I think, of course, we have to figure out which one is better or worse. But I would argue that some of this seems to stem specifically from unemployment and fear of lack of money. So, would you be open for like some form of like a permanent stimulus to incentivize people staying home, or at least a temporary stimulus check, like some form of a temporary universal basic income?
I think that like even if you're providing people money, like I definitely like the dread of money is one thing, but even without that, just not working and being less social still will contribute to that.
Sure, I would.
Maybe it would contribute less now. Like if you don't have to worry about money, like definitely
Yeah.
that would
Well, that's
contribute
the thing
less.
is like either regardless of which of like so if we decide to completely or not completely, I'm sure that you would have some kind of reasonable responsibility for reopening, but whether we stay closed or we open up, I think that like people are there's going to be like an excess death regardless. What I would say though is that you can most likely mitigate a significant amount of that excess death by some form of universal basic income. I mean, I know that there's like the argument of like people will be, they're bored and they feel like they lack fulfillment, but I think money takes priority over all things. In general, to reduce. I mean, I couldn't tell you what specifically the percentage that would be reduced by implementing some kind of UBI, but I would argue that it would take a significant amount of the stressors off, especially for like adults. Kids, it's one of those things where it is what it is. I mean, I feel like having some form of like lockdown works out pretty well. I would imagine that one of the stressors on parents right now is because they have to send their kid to school half the time, and then half the time they have to keep them home, so it makes it difficult for them to figure out and like navigate how they're gonna stay home with their kid, which will probably just add to the financial burden. So like I mean, and I really just don't think it's good to like let kids just go back to school 100%. So I would say like, you know, why not have some kind of a universal basic income?
Yeah, there's even problems outside of that, like child abuse and
Mhm.
domestic violence in general. Child sexual abuse has gone way up since the lockdowns, and that's probably due to like in abusive households. Now the kids
Mhm.
are at home more. Maybe they're more annoying to the parents, or the parents in general just terrible people, and
Right.
so this results in a lot more of that. So that's the other thing that I
Well, what? How
would
much have
really
they gone? Because I mean, that's terrible. But how much have they gone up, or what was the original number?
let me
Because
see.
that you know, I don't know how that could be some kind of an
I've got
outlier. And again, if you reduce the stress of money, I imagine that those numbers would go down as well.
I've got two articles on that. Just need to pull up my document. Right. Where is it? There it is. Okay, U.S. Today. Copy.
Let's see.
If you ever want to like read over this stuff, like because I've got a ton of studies on lockdowns and like all sorts of different things, and I can give you like this whole doc if you ever want to like, or this whole article.
Yeah,
It's
when you
it's
publish it,
just
you
like a
can.
draft of the article, but you might be interested in it. Oh wait, no, that's the wrong, not the CDC one. Delete. The NPR. Oops, I forgot to actually link this one. I need to make sure I
So
fix that.
just getting into this article, it seems like these children that are abused, it's not that there's more children necessarily being abused, it's that there are more instances of children that are already being abused more. That seems to be the focus of this article. Um,
Right, yeah, that's what I was suggesting when I said like,
yeah.
people are at home more, so they're around like abusive parents more.
Yeah, so I mean that I feel like is, you know, almost you know, that's kind of another, that's a whole other topic, because I mean, I guess you can make the arguments like, yeah, we shouldn't have lockdowns because, you know, we obviously we want to reduce the number of times that kids get abused, but it sounds like we're kind of just like kind of covering up kids getting abused. I would say that if there's more kids having these issues, then we need that there should be like an alternative method for helping those kids out. I wouldn't say let's open back up so to give parents, make it easier for parents to abuse their children. Um, due to the frequency of it and then probably not getting caught. That's like a whole other type of an issue, I would argue. You know, we could just start, you know, putting
Yeah, I mean these
killing parents if you
like
I would
these
be fine with
are
that. We could just start killing these parents
yeah, that's a good idea.
or
But
something.
these are like things that are actually being reported to like the government or certain hotlines. Like this one is about like the sexual abuse. It's things being reported to RAINN, which is the Rape Abuse Incest National Network,
Mhm.
and stuff like that. So like that, that's good. This isn't just some data people
No,
like
no, no. I
pull out of
totally, no,
thin
no. I
air. So it's
totally,
definitely like
yeah. I trust, you
it's
know,
definitely going to the right place.
yeah, no, I trust the sources that you're providing. Like, I'm not questioning. I usually do. I'm just saying. I think that like there could be a different solution, a conversation about a different solution. Because I don't know, like, you know, kids getting abused, obviously is a big deal. But so kids are getting abused at greater rates, which means that the kids getting abused in the first place, the parents weren't even getting punished. So, um, that's where I would focus more on is mitigating that. Um, and rather than saying, well, let's not do lockdowns, one of the factors being because kids are, or kids already being abused or being abused more, I would say let's start dealing with that problem rather than kind of overlooking it. Because it seems like if kids are coming in and they're getting abused, and it seems like we're just pushing it off to the side out of convenience rather than actually dealing with it. And that seems like kind of a problem in general of just like, you're like, yeah, whatever. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Because I mean, yeah, again, like I
Yeah, I
imagine
mean,
those
in
kids coming to
general,
the
definitely.
hospital. They're coming into the hospital with these injuries, and then we're just like, okay, and then there's nothing we do about it. That seems like more of an issue than anything else.
Yeah, we definitely should be doing more about it. Yeah, but that's just one of the concerns I have. You see more of these kids at home, and like how many aren't being reported that we don't know about.
True, but I imagine
And
that those that
so,
that
that's just
that
one part of the whole picture for
I
me.
imagine that would already be in right. So these kids, it's probably the same kids getting abused, right. So you're saying like some aren't reported. Sure, that would be the same way whether or not the
Mhm.
coronavirus existed. Though there would be a ton of kids not getting reported. That just seems like an issue of society overall. And I understand what you're saying. Like it obviously exacerbates the issue, and when you look at the outcome, like you should definitely do something about it. I just think it's time to give more of a shit about people who get abused because honestly, I don't really think that we care too much as a society, especially if they're coming in more so frequently. It's the same kids over and over again. I think that's almost like a whole other thing. But I do understand what you're saying.
Mhm.
So what would like I mean, for lack of a better word, what would lockdowns look like to you? Like, what would you specifically do?
I would say like just mostly leave it up to the people themselves, rather than having the government tell people what to do, because everyone's different. Certain people have to do certain different things, but at the same time, I think people would, generally recognize that okay, this is the certain group of people that we should be helping. Because like in general, you don't actually have the media telling you the proper things, right?
Hmm.
No one
Well,
in the
what?
media ever told me that, oh, it's mostly people over 85 dying. It's like a
Um,
very large majority.
I
Like they don't tell it
I
for
heard
the
that.
most part.
I heard. I mean, I was pretty well aware that like it was the people that were older that were the ones dying, as well as like high risk people, especially with
Yeah, I mean,
asthma.
we know like it's a lot of older people dying.
Yeah,
Like you do hear that, but like there's just specific things that they don't really tell you,
yeah. So what
and
what were some of the things
they
that
cherry pick.
what were some of the things that they hadn't told you that you felt frustrated about?
Um, I would say like the increase in suicides and stuff like that. Like you find
Sure.
some articles on it, but most people aren't reading the articles like that. They're looking at the social media and they're looking at on TV.
Hmm.
Usually, they're seeing the actual videos and they're not talking about that stuff as much. Like you'll definitely find more in the articles
Hmm.
themselves.
So
You're not seeing as many articles in mainstream media about how like the studies that show lockdowns don't work or aren't effective,
are
and
there
you're seeing them
studies?
use bad studies.
What are the studies saying that say the lockdowns don't work, and what are they using to measure the lack of success of lockdowns?
Oh, I've got several of those. I've got ones that like look at certain countries compared to each other, look at countries, like what happened before and after the lockdown,
Hmm.
like what they did
Sure. Which
during that
yeah,
time period,
you could
stuff
send
like that.
whatever you got.
But yeah, I'll just send this whole entire document
Oh,
to you.
shit.
It'll make it easier.
Oh shit, dude! You're not gonna let me play my fucking game.
Wait, I'm gonna. This is on where you can. Okay, just make sure you don't edit anything inside it because I have this on editor on
Okay, no,
because I
no
sent it to
problem.
people. I sent it to people for the website so they can add suggestions and stuff like that. So
Hmm.
yeah, just don't erase the whole thing.
All right.
I'm good. I should have made a copy
Don't. I'm
anyways.
not gonna. I'm not gonna. All right. Do you have the articles themselves? Are they in here?
Yep, everything's linked in there.
Where are they?
The blue words. If you just click on or left click or right click on one of the blue words, it'll have the source in there. And then on the what's that 1, 2, 3 page, on the third page,
I forgot what point we were talking about. Oh, so some of the well, we're talking about the ineffectiveness of COVID lockdowns, right? So what was
Mhm.
paraphrase it for me? What do you? So what exactly were the claims?
All right. I've got like some conclusions on here. Okay. So this study in July from the Lancet, which is like one of the most prestigious medical journals in the world,
Hmm.
um, it concluded The authors identified a negative association between number of days to any lockdown and the total reported cases per million, where a longer time prior to implementation of any lockdown was associated with a lower number of detected cases per million. And then the next one, which is also in the Lancet.
So wait, hold on. So it said that there were less cases detected when there was lockdowns, or more cases detected when there's lockdowns.
Between the number of days of the oh man, my eyes, I can't even read right now.
Yeah, because that's a very
Real
interesting claim there. Just send just send it to me if you could, the specific article that you're reading right now.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know if I read it wrong or something, or if I read it right. And oh crap, dude, I don't want you to take away the link.
What
That's
happened?
not what I wanted.
Oh, I thought it. Okay, I thought I did something.
Copy. I'm gonna have to find it again. Where is it? I think this is it. Where's that the other one?
Oh, geez, I'm still
Dang it.
I'm still dying over the fucking thing. While you look for it, what other statistics, or rather, what other claims were made? Because to me, I would argue. Do you think that like? I would argue that regardless of which way you turn, like I imagine that just from a commonsensical perspective, we'd have to acknowledge that there would be a faster spreading if we didn't lock down. Like before, you mentioned like, hey, I think my solution would be like rapid testing for people within nursing homes, which is like, okay, that makes sense to me. It's still acknowledging that there's an issue with the spreading of it, but we just want to mitigate that spread while we also deal with the issue of people becoming depressed. So I'm like for that form of, I guess you would call that a lockdown. And I'm for like new inventive ways to lock down, like you said, like rapid testing. I'm totally fine with stuff like that. I just don't think that. I think that I just don't. I just feel like the claim that it doesn't that lockdowns don't work. That just seems like a very exaggerated claim.
Yeah, so in these cases, it's not just like, okay, like, cutting people off from each other where they can't spread it to each other doesn't work. It's more of like how it actually plays out. Like, okay, for this certain amount of time, these people are separated, so there's not as many cases. Okay, now we relax it. And then, oh, here comes all the cases again because it wasn't actually gone, which happened in several countries and
Mhm.
areas. So that's one thing that happens. Another thing is
Wait, so
just
did you just say that they
people.
basically, when people stop the lockdowns, the numbers get worse again?
Yeah, so basically, it didn't really do anything. Like
Well, not. I don't. I
you
wouldn't
have a certain
agree.
amount of
I
time.
wouldn't agree that it didn't do anything. I mean, what you said, what it sounded like you said was when we were locked down, the numbers were down, and then when we opened back up, the numbers got worse again. It sounds like lockdowns do work, according to that article. What you just
So
said to me.
that's just like one example of it.
Right, but
It's
I would just say
where
during
like
that example,
overall.
that example demonstrates that lockdowns do work, though. It's just that when you open back up, the
Yeah,
numbers go
because
back up.
I wouldn't say like every single lockdown absolutely doesn't work. Like in this particular time frame, it may like quote unquote work, but
Mhm.
ultimately it didn't really do anything
Well,
except
yeah.
for, like, like you may just end up having the exact same number of deaths that you would have anyways, because now you have this
Well, once you
worse
open.
outbreak after it's
No,
done,
totally. We could, we had like a little bit of a
stuff like
conversation
that.
about that, but it sounds like what that article just said was that when we were locked down, it worked, but then when we reopen, it stops working, and that's a very different. That doesn't sound like. It sounds like lockdowns do work, according to that article. That actually supports the narrative that the lockdowns would work. And now we're kind of circling back into the conversation about like whether it's worth opening back up to mitigate people taking their own lives due to some form of depression or despair. But that's a different conversation than
I,
whether or not lockdowns do or don't work.
I just found the study. I accidentally deleted it off of my doc for somehow. I have to put it back on there, but I DM'd it to you.
Mm-hmm.
The second one I was talking about was also in the Lancet. Said that rapid border closures, full lockdowns, and widespread testing were not associated with COVID-19 mortality per million people. And then the last, well, not the last one, actually, I have a lot, but this is one of the last ones I have listed right here. This one states that the UK lockdown was both superfluous, which means it did not prevent an otherwise explosive behavior of the spread of the coronavirus, and ineffective. It did not slow down the death growth rate visibly.
Mhm.
So you see different things. It just depends on the particular lockdown. In some areas, you might see it where
Well, yeah,
it
that's the thing
quote
too.
unquote
Is like
worked for a little bit and then didn't.
what was their lockdown though? Let me
You mean
just.
like the UK's
Well, yeah,
lockdown?
like you said, like what was the lockdown, and then let me continuously read this. Hold on a second. Yeah, this seems to suggest that it's not a full lockdown. Seemed to have been an overall negative, and then it brings up some points about different people with higher risk. Like some of those are obesity and whatnot. I don't know. This basically just says that there, like what you were saying before, that there should be an offset, and that like some of the risk factors aren't worth it. Like you had said, like increased mortality rate due to the lockdown.
Right.
And that there seemed to be an issue with people in some of these countries who are fatter, like America, having more issues because they're fatter. But yeah, I mean, again, we could totally reorient our lockdown, but this seems to talk more about full lockdowns rather than partial lockdowns. And I don't know exactly what would a full lockdown would be considered, but I don't even. I mean, maybe California even isn't doing a full lockdown. They're just lowering the capacity of businesses and having a 10 o'clock curfew. Which doesn't seem like an inherently bad thing to me, because I would imagine, again, with the 10 o'clock curfew, that's disincentivizing people from going out and partying, which would be like the biggest spread. I mean, I think that there was like a wedding in Maryland or something where like 7 people got the coronavirus and spread it to a bunch of other people. Then you could look at. I mean, obviously Donald Trump wasn't exactly the best when they were at the first debate. I think him and then his son ended up getting coronavirus and a bunch of other people. I know he's high risk, but it just doesn't seem like lockdowns in general are bad. It seems like particular types of lockdowns can be bad, like full lockdowns, but I don't think that we're at that point. I would argue if we don't do any type of a partial lockdown, then that would get us to the point where we would have to full lockdown again just to completely stop the spread of the coronavirus. I mean, I mean, realistically, we're just trying to slow it down until we get to the point where we can actually have a widespread vaccine. But it doesn't even seem like people can adhere, especially in more conservative areas, to simple mask wearing and social distancing. I mean, I think that's a big issue. Like if we had this whole understanding as a society, it's like, yeah, you wear your mask, you social distance. We're gonna keep it like a partial capacity. That seems reasonable. Maybe even a 10 o'clock curfew. I don't think that's really that big of a deal. But like you're seeing, people just simply aren't adhering to that, which I think is a problem too. Is
Yeah, I mean
individuals tired of it?
that's one of the reasons why some certain policies might just fail, like mask wearing, for instance. That's like human error. People will not do it properly. Like for example, a surgical mask. you're not supposed to wear those past 2 hours. They don't last past 2 hours. Most people don't know that. Like the actual research on surgical masks, like if you're wearing this to protect someone or protect yourself, then don't wear it past 2 hours. Uh, Cloth masks are generally pretty
What
crappy
exactly is a
for
surgical mask? That's like the
some sort of.
traditional mask. Okay.
It's like the blue ones,
Why are they
like
not
the
working for more
disposable
than
ones.
why do they lose why are they losing effectiveness after 2 hours?
I don't know the exact science behind it. I can show you like data on it, like that shows it. I don't know exactly how it
Yeah, no,
works
I'm
per
reading something.
se.
Apparently, they decrease in what is that? Efficiency after four
Yeah, I mean, if you
hours.
just Google surgical mask 2 hours, or
Well, that's
there's
something
there's
to
gonna
be.
be articles that pop up.
Yeah, sure. No, I'm reading it. It doesn't necessarily mean that they completely lose effectiveness after you wear them for 4 hours. Something to do with a micro barrier in the surgical mask.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, it's definitely not. It's not like it doesn't exist anymore, but it's
sure.
definitely not nearly the same.
Yeah. Right. Well, it still works. And then if we educate the public, they could just buy better masks. Is there a lack of effectiveness on just regular cloth masks?
Yeah, regular cloth masks are generally less effective than a surgical mask, a
Right.
functioning surgical mask. Anyways, the best thing to have is a N95
Hmm.
because those are going to be absolutely effective because those aren't going to let anything out or in without getting filtered. But the issue with N95 mask is they have to fit just right, which
Right.
if
Yeah.
you gain a little weight, lose a little weight, um, and this is why some of the widespread N95 masking flopped so hard in Japan. Like I've
Hmm.
got an article like that in one of my COVID docs as well, because this is what works, but people just didn't know how to use it. And,
How did they say it
if
flopped
you have a
though?
beard, you can't like you couldn't wear an N95 mask at all
Right. Yeah.
because you
Right.
have a big beard. It wouldn't work at all.
Did they? How did they show that it didn't work and how did they measure the failure of an N95 in China or you said Japan?
I
Sorry,
think
Japan.
they just didn't see any sort of decrease, and they actually
Oh.
like observed people not using them correctly.
Oh, well then that would just say like well that if they didn't see a decrease, I would imagine that just says that they didn't see them use it normally, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't effective, because normally cloth masks and these surgical masks have like slits in the side of them too, where I mean I imagine that your breath can pass through, but that doesn't make them ineffective. That just doesn't make them as effective if you don't use them
Yeah,
100% perfectly.
they're not like what an N95 mask should be.
Sure, but it still sounds like they're effective. They're just not as effective as they could be. But that doesn't display that masks aren't effective in general.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't say they're like just not effective in general. I would just say like in many instances you can have a lot of human error.
Sure.
Like people not really understanding which masks they should wear, or like masks mostly rely on you in a situation where someone who is infected and does have symptoms is coughing or sneezing or maybe talking in your face, and
Mhm.
there's actual big chunks of spit. Otherwise, like a sneeze is over 100 miles per hour. If
Right.
you
That
sneeze,
that
there's
sound
going to be like
yeah.
excess stuff coming out the sides and stuff like that.
That's
So there's definitely like not like no risk. There's various studies on masks. Some show
mhm.
good signs, some show not really
Yeah.
anything. But like I
Well,
mean, in general, it's stupid to say masks don't work at all.
yeah, it sounded like in
But
in the thing that you proposed that it just seems like people just don't understand proper etiquette in general. I mean, even with a mask on, you shouldn't be
right.
sneezing forward. I mean, you should absolutely be sneezing into your hand or not your hand. You should be sneezing into the crux of your arm. People don't even understand that.
Yeah, I mean, look at who just got elected president. There's videos of Biden where he's like up speaking and he like takes his mask down and then coughs in his hand. It's like people are just like that.
Right,
They're
yeah.
just
No,
dumb.
it's
They're
true.
not thinking about it. They're not used to. Even though we've been wearing masks for so long, they're not used to them.
Yeah,
Like
it's funny
it's
because
like that right there. Guy who had COVID, he sits there coughs in his hand. Now 20 other people have it. Like, good job, man.
right, yeah. Well, I think that's like kind of the problem. That's just basic, I don't know if it's basic, but that's just lack of understanding in general. That's ignorance. But that's something nobody's being educated on in general.
Yeah.
Like we're not even pushing the narrative of like, hey, wash your hands frequently, or use hand sanitizer after you touch anything, or sneeze correctly.
Mhm.
We're just kind of we can kind of barely get people to actually wear masks. But like, would you? So if you had it your way, what's everything that we would do? What are the policies that you do? You wouldn't, because you would be completely up to the individual. You don't think that there should be any um, conversation about people. There shouldn't be any mandates in general. Do you think it should just be all public, or whatever, a
Um,
state choice? I imagine.
yeah, as far as like government mandates, I would say not really. I would say like we could encourage like the media to actually, give people what they need. Like primarily like what you said, washing hands is the most important thing.
Yeah, it's certainly
Keeping your
very
hands away from your
important.
face is the most important thing. Social distancing,
Well, I mean,
those
I don't
three
know if
things.
it's the
Like if you
most
do those three
important.
things,
I mean, I imagine the masks are very, very important. I mean, I can't give you the percentage, but because like
as long as it,
right. No, continue. You can keep going. Sorry.
with the washing hands and stuff, that's mostly you preventing yourself from getting it and like
Hmm.
not touching your face and stuff. So that's like preventing it. Like when you're talking about masks, that's mostly people who actually have it. Because I
Hmm.
mean, masks are even less so going to help you if you're trying to prevent yourself from getting it. They're mostly for protecting
How
other
so?
people.
I've heard that before, but it doesn't really make any sense to me. I mean, if there's a barrier within the mask, it's going to go both ways, no? So why would it be less effective at helping you?
Because if someone sneezes on you, it's like okay, it just blocked my mouth and nose, but you got your
Right.
eyes, you got your ears,
Sure.
you got stuff that's still there. You got little openings and
Right.
stuff. It's just ultimately, it's not going to
Well,
really
that I mean, I just
do a
I
whole lot.
couldn't I can't find an instance in my life that where somebody like directly sneezed on me before the coronavirus. I couldn't imagine that's not like a widespread issue. People sneezing on each other. To be honest with you.
Oh yeah, just like
Yeah.
maybe little kids.
Right. Yeah. See, that would be a difference, and then they're not going to wear masks anyway. Yeah. No. So what I do know is I remember that when the coronavirus, when we were having the debates, Trump was touting the fact that he reduced like the death toll from the projected 2 million plus down to like 200,000. And so like that 2 million was projected based off of nothing being done. So I would imagine if we didn't implement anything, which is what you seem to be suggesting, that those numbers would just skyrocket based off of that. Because to me, like if we're going to be less restrictive, I'd say, okay, let's start doing rapid testing in some instances. Let's keep things at a particular capacity and let's do a lockdown. That seems like a reasonable take to me. And
Right.
also
Yeah.
mandating
Yeah.
businesses to put up plexiglass barriers, for people, which they're doing in New York. I don't know how it is in every state. I know I went to New York, I went to Maryland, and I went to Maine and New Hampshire, and they seem to be adhering to those. So, but those are also more northern states. So I don't know specifically the way the rest of the country is doing anything. I know Florida's a shit show. Um, and people are refusing to wear masks in general. My uncle lives down there now, and my fiance's parents live down there as well, and nobody wears a mask. So I mean, that might be anecdotal, but I think that that's pretty. Um, I think that that's safe to say that that's kind of the mentality in a lot of conservative states where they won't even wear a mask or do the bare minimum of that or social distancing. So it doesn't seem like, I don't know how much more encouragement we can do when you have a bunch of people who just simply think that masks don't work in general and don't have any level of effectiveness.
Yeah, as far as like the projection, you're talking about like the 2 million
Mhm.
projection. I think it was the same group that made that projection that made one about Sweden. It said like by this certain time they would have like I think it was like 90,000 deaths, and by that time they actually had like 4,000. And they made a lot of different projections. And some of these groups or certain people who were like way at the beginning making certain projections, they would change them over time and stuff like that. And,
Well, yeah, but those
it was
project
very
those
hard making
those were
predictions
worst
way at
case
the
scenario
beginning.
projections, and they were changing because they were actually implementing like forms of lockdown. So I don't know if we can just completely discount and discredit those for shifting. I mean, of course they're going to shift as you implement lockdown. I do. I just it seems like in many instances you're quick to write off the effectiveness of like mask wearing and whatnot. That's what it seems
Yeah,
like.
for this case, when we're looking at a projection, I would rather like after all this time, now we have studies like actually looking at these at the effectiveness of these different policies, and so we can go. I think it's much better to go off of those because projections are just that. They're just projections, and most of them have been wrong. on like every level,
Well, wait, hold on,
especially
so
like the whole Sweden one I mentioned.
yeah, restate what you'd said. What do you want to focus on instead?
Like what the stuff we've actually seen. Like
Well, yeah,
now
but
we
like
have
so
actual data to go off of.
right, but like I understand that, but like the data still suggests that lockdowns are helpful. I would say overall, not full lockdowns. A lot of these conversations we're having are about leveraging the depression rates versus like lockdowns, which I totally understand. I could totally get on board reducing like lockdowns, but I don't think that there's a study that says that lockdowns don't work in general. And I think that those projections, the reason I brought them up wasn't saying we're going to get back to a 2 million death count. Of course not. But what I brought it up was because like doing absolutely nothing, which just seems to be what you're kind of suggesting, would absolutely increase the rate of people contracting and dying from the coronavirus. Um, unless you're into like herd immunity or something, it's not something I support. But I mean, if that's your argument, it's consistent. Um,
Yeah, I mean, herd
hey, thank you
immunity
so much for
definitely is
the
a possibility, and a
thank
lot
you
of
so much for
people
the
are against that.
donation,
But I think still, as
McGroggers.
long as we're like trying to focus on protecting the vulnerable people,
Mm-hmm.
and also you do have to stay under like the hospital capacity and stuff like that. But like you don't want to flatten the line either because that's
Mm-hmm.
not good. You want to have the capacity like right below uh the maximum.
Mm-hmm. Well, it seems like we're playing a bit of a dangerous game to have it right at the max because we had like completely over capacity hospitals at the start of this, and I mean, me personally, I would be very afraid of what would happen at the beginning because there are people who are simply getting pushed away because they weren't experiencing the specific symptoms and whatnot, or rather they progressed enough, and that can lead to a very quick death for people. So I mean, that seems like we're playing a line, you know.
Yeah, I mean, in the first place, I would want the like we certainly don't have as much resources as we should have, and that's a big reason for that. As far as like hospitals and the certain equipment goes, because I know a lot of people were complaining about like, oh, we didn't have enough beds in the beginning or ventilators and stuff like that, and that's actually because of policies put in place by the government. They're called certificate of need laws.
Hmm.
And so, like, okay, we want 200 beds, but we have 100 right now, right? So we
Sure.
need 100 beds. And so we have to go to the government and go, yeah, here's proof that we need 100 more beds.
Hmm.
And we have to actually prove we need it. Then they'll let us have it. Or here's proof we need 1,000 more ventilators.
Well,
Or here's proof we need a new
right.
hospital right here. And it's just
My
kind of
well,
ridiculous.
that seems a little sweeping because my understanding was what happened was is obviously we're not going to like have too many beds or ventilators in general in preparation for a virus we had no expectation of. So what it seemed more like to me is that when we needed those, we had to obviously requisition those, or rather, we had to take over factories and we had to get them up to par to be able to produce these, and that takes time. I don't think that there was necessarily a governmental failure in preparation for it outside of like I guess not preparing for it in the beginning when we knew about it in I believe November or December. But I don't think anybody was clamoring for anything. We didn't take it seriously at all. I mean, I'm not saying the government's great, but I don't think that there was necessarily a governmental failure in the handling of it when it came to like preparation. Or at the very least, neither political party was on top of it at all. No individual was that worried about it. Um, I don't really think that there was necessarily
Yeah, I
an issue
wouldn't
with the
say like this
preparedness
is
of it.
a thing about I don't think this is something like about actual preparation, but like yeah, so the government's like, okay, you can't have this certain amount of beds, even if you want them, because I don't think you need them right now. Well, then you have a pandemic the next 6 months, and now you need them, and
Hmm.
now it's an emergency, and you have to like be pumping these out fast, and you have to they're
Well,
taking our factories, like you said, and stuff like that. So that's more what I'm talking about. It's not like they were
yeah.
putting beds in gear to prepare for a pandemic, but
Well,
now we
that's what I
had no
mean.
way to prepare
Was
for it.
there actually a failure once the pandemic hit, where they're like, "Oh, we have a pandemic, let's not worry about it"? Because it's not what I believe is that it was more um, that we weren't prepped because like there was no real reason to oversaturate resources for something we didn't even anticipate happening in general.
I think there was. I can't think of stuff like right off the top of my head. I vaguely remember some stuff about like failures in that area, but they weren't quite allocating resources quite properly when it came
Mhm.
to it, but I'm just not gonna be able to come up with that stuff off the top of my head. I think
Yeah,
there
I
was some
understand that.
stuff with like that happened with like them getting Ford to produce ventilators and something around there. They ended up causing like less ventilators to be produced or something is but yeah, I just don't remember that off the top of my head. I'd have to go back and try to find like the articles and stuff on that.
Sure. All right. Um. Okay. Well, I personally, I mean, honestly, I'm fine with the lockdowns. I don't know if we have the statistics that leverage the amount of projected deaths due to lockdowns versus the amount of projected deaths due to not locking down. We there was a point before where I mentioned like projection rates. And to an extent, you kind of
Mhm.
dismiss those projections in the beginning, but then you're playing off of projection statistics of people taking their own lives due to depression from not being locked down. So I think that I mean, honestly, I understand the projection. I would take that as I would take it into consideration, but I don't know if they're less than or over what period of time. I don't even think in that study it told us over what period of time we were going to see an increase in death rates. I'm not even sure if it was for this year, if it was projected for next year, if we maintained a lockdown. I don't even know if that's something that anybody is considering, the maintaining of a lockdown next year. We're supposed to have something done by the summer of next year, I believe. So at this point, we're just trying to get through the next few months before we have a developed vaccine, which seems practical for me. Um,
Yeah, as far as like projections, like I'm completely fine with using projections, obviously. But if a projection was basically proven false, then at that
well,
point,
I don't.
you
I
know,
don't
let's
think that the original
get
projections were
that one.
proven false. I think that they changed because those projections were based on if we did nothing versus if we did something. I'm not saying that they're going to go up to 2 million. What I was saying is that like obviously lockdowns did work if the projections went from 2 million and then the actual number hit 200,000. So a factor in that was locking down. And then I'm arguing that if we open back up, we're going to see a spike and an increase in death rates. And then we kind of have to see what the projection of death rates, the projection of increase of deaths going to be from lockdown due to like forms of depression and financial insecurity versus maintaining the lockdown. And then we need to see how much of that is financial insecurity, because if a lot of it is that, we could also offset that by implementing some kind of temporary or even permanent universal basic income. So I think that there are other measures to explore than full opening up um the government. And that's where I would come from. And I'm always somebody who promotes universal basic income, so obviously I'm going to be, I suppose, biased from that perspective, but I do think it would alleviate a lot of issues. We had kind of a piss poor, well, I guess it wasn't that bad. We had like one $1,200 check, and then people on unemployment were able to extend, but that ended months ago. So I think that's an
Yeah, they
issue as
didn't even
well.
give me my check.
Oh, you didn't get your check, really?
No.
That's fucked up. I got a check. The hell, they fucked you over, dude. Why didn't you get a check? Were you working, or were you? Are
Yeah,
you
I was
young?
working,
Are
but
you young? How old are you?
I'm 20.
Oh, okay, yeah. So you shouldn't have had an issue. That's fucked up. It's bizarre.
Yeah, I'm
Hmm.
not sure what happened. No, I mean I am like generally against that sort of stuff, like government spending, because I don't believe in like taxation. But it is kind of nice. Get $1,000.
Oh yeah, you're not into the government spending until you like it, huh? What do you? Okay, so like,
Like,
if you're comfortable moving off this topic, before you go, would you be open to me trying to sell universal basic income on you?
I'm not. I don't think you're gonna be able to do it,
No,
honestly.
not at all. Not at all. You don't think so?
No, because I think it's mostly like the ethical thing for me. Like I don't, off the top of my head, I don't know a ton of arguments on universal basic income. I know several people who do. I think you're bringing on my friend Political Minder at some point. The guy
Oh
who does like the
yeah,
stick figure stuff.
he mentioned, yeah, he doesn't like
I
UBI.
think he knows some stuff about it, and I
I know
know
you. I know you
two other guys.
libertarians. I know you libertarians hate UBI. I don't know. I don't know why you don't like UBI. It's free money, man. You know.
Well, I wouldn't say hate. As far as UBI, generally libertarians will support that over certain forms of welfare because
But
it
yeah,
can
it's
be
usually an offset to
more
forms of
effective.
welfare. That's kind of
Yeah,
that.
a lot
That's
of
why I support
libertarians
it.
see like UBI or negative income tax as like a transition from like a state dependency on welfare and then you've got, okay, now you've got this money to kind of transition you to a stage where either you're able to take care of yourself or you've got private charity.
Wait, what were you saying? Were you saying that private charity would be a good alternative? Is that what you're telling me?
I'm saying like the UBI and negative income tax is seen as like a transitionary stage to for people who are like dependent on welfare, to get them either to a point where they're able to take care of themselves or they're taken care of through like some sort of private charity
Right,
or
yeah.
private welfare.
Well, yeah, the idea is to get people off of welfare programs by getting them onto universal basic income.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's one of the arguments, which is where I come from. That's one of the factors, rather, is like getting people off of shit like that. So that's kind of like, well, that, and then like obviously technology displacing jobs and driving down wages for me is like what really sold me on a UBI. But yeah, I mean, if you're not open to it, we don't have to talk about it. It's no problem. That's like my big thing.
Yeah, I know you definitely like talking about it. I
Oh
mean,
yeah, all the
I
time.
hate to disappoint you, but like it's because of like my moral position. I don't think it would do
Well,
much because
that's fair. Well, I understand that. What makes it so immoral to you?
well, it's the taxation that's immoral because I believe people have the right to their own property without someone like the government being able to come in and say, oh, well, you owe me this certain amount.
Okay.
I don't think there's any moral justification for that. Like I know people see it as like, oh, you're helping people,
Well,
but also I
yeah,
could make arguments like, okay, I can rob you at gunpoint and then pay for someone's hospital
sure.
bills. Like, okay, I did a good thing. That doesn't necessarily mean the thing I did was the way I did it was good.
You're not a Robin Hood fan?
Well, Robin Hood, it kind of depends on your story of Robin Hood. In some
Well,
cases,
the
he's
one where
more of a
one where he's a fox. In that case, you're a fan of the
where
Fox
he's a
Robin Hood?
fox. Oh man, that's been so
Uh,
long since I watched that
the one
movie.
where he just takes from the rich and gives to the poor. You're not a big fan of that?
No, I wouldn't say I'm a fan of just taking, but usually the story is he's like taking back. He's actually taking back taxes. So, like in some stories of Robin Hood, it definitely varies. I
That's
don't remember
fair.
the fox one
Well, you
specifically.
could. Well, he was the
But yeah, I
fox
mean,
in that.
yeah.
It was an all animal one for Disney. Well, he's taking back taxes, which would be a UBI. I mean, you'd collect taxes and you take them back for people. But so at the core of what you're saying is, it seems like you don't want people to like lose the value of their labor, right?
In a way, yeah, but
So
not quite the Marxist way, but in a way, yeah.
it sounds like libertarianism and Marxism are very similar. You guys both have an issue with people being valued based on their labor. But either way, in like a capitalist system, like how can you guarantee you're getting? And I'm not somebody who thinks that, well, value of your labor, I suppose, is subjective. I mean, there's a lot of factors. I mean, I'm a capitalist, so, but like,
Yeah, I think
under limited government control, what's stopping big businesses from like not paying you the value of your labor? Um, because it sounds like either way, like whether you're more I guess capitalist in the sense, you're basically submitting to getting paid less due to less restrictions on businesses, and then if you're more communist, you're uh, getting, well, I guess both. Well, excuse me, when your perspective is like, I'm losing less of my labor due to tax, or I'm losing my labor value due to taxes, and then communists are like, oh, I'm losing my labor value due to capitalist systems taking as much as they possibly can out of me. It sounds like they're kind of one and the same. Whichever way you
yeah,
go, it
I
seems like there's a lack of
definitely
value
think
in your wage.
I definitely think at face value, there's a lot of similarities you can draw from libertarians to leftists, and that's one of the things that really helps me when I'm converting people because that's what I'm good at. I'm good at like getting people more sympathetic to libertarianism or being pro-life or some other positions I have.
Hmm.
And I've turned a lot of people into libertarians, and so when I'm talking to a leftist, I'm going to have these these things we have in common,
Hmm.
and show how we're not quite as different as they think, but that my way is just more effective.
Sure.
So as far as like, yeah, I definitely want people to protect the what they earn, but with the difference between taxes and like what they call wage theft or wage slavery is the taxes aren't voluntary at all.
Right. Well, I mean, the involuntary
And we
tax. I
see
would argue that like an involuntary tax system would just not work for us to have as many of the systems that we do now. The charity doesn't really go to the right place. It just goes to the place where people think. Um, I mean, there's nothing. It's fine if people want to donate to places, but I wouldn't say that you're better off with somebody redistributing in a more conducive way than just being like, well, I'd like more taxes to go to this, that, and the other thing. And then, of course, I've heard libertarian perspective, or some of them. I don't know if this is what you share, but a lot of times they're like, yeah, we should get most of our taxes for our police from donations, right? Is that something that you believe?
yeah, I think police should
Yes.
be funded through donations.
Yeah, so then how? So obviously, people with more money can donate more to the police, which means they control the police. So how do you make it so that the police will fight for the common man when the rich are the ones that have control over the police because they're the ones donating?
That's why I would have like I'm not an anarchist, so you don't have like these police that are actually based off of this person pays me, so I serve them.
Hmm.
So in general, the police will be protecting everyone, no matter like who gets the
Right.
money. They just have their set area, and
Right.
that's one of the reasons you're going to have the police actually centralized in that area.
Well, I don't know that that would necessarily work because, like, first and foremost, you could literally just threaten to be like, okay, I'm not going to donate to the police because they don't work specifically for me, and so like you've instantly won there. And then, are we also going to stop individuals from having their own private like security or police? Like, how limited do we get? Because it just sounds like a fast track to having more class disparity.
I think that you can have your own private security
Yeah.
firms. As far as like police goes, like to an extent, but ultimately they wouldn't have more power than the police themselves or equal power.
Mhm.
Like I mean, now we have this stuff, right? We have a private security. I work for a private security firm,
Sure, but
and I can
they're pretty
arrest
limited.
people.
Yeah, they're pretty limited.
Yeah,
I would
yeah,
just
exactly.
argue that with a donation system, obviously people are going to gravitate towards getting more money. They're going to gravitate towards the people who are going to give them more money. Like that's, and it's just going to turn into like an upper class with money being able to control the police, which
So
I don't think
actually,
is
I have
unrealistic.
a very good example for this actually. So a lot of people will talk about like the private fire companies, back before you had public fire companies, and they'll talk about it like it's a bad thing, like, oh, only rich people could actually afford firefighters, so that's a bad thing. But they don't actually have real world examples of that being a bad thing, because
Mhm.
in reality, what would happen is the rich people would pay for insurance for the houses around them and the buildings around them, because if they catch on fire, that just puts more risk of your place catching on fire. Even if you have the firefighters, like, okay, so 3 houses away, this house is on fire. What do I do? Wait until my house is on fire for them to start fighting it?
Mhm.
No, absolutely not. So
Right.
if
Well,
I'm living over here, I got all these criminals down here. I don't want to wait until they come to me, because I'm the rich one. I'm the one with all the money. Even if I have some of the protection, why
mhm.
wait? It ultimately is in my best interest.
Are there any
With like
examples? Are there any examples of private police who's working? Because to me, those are two very different things. I don't really see a point of power in having control over the fire department. I also don't know that I would see people actually. I mean, what time period are talking about this in this case?
I think this was like 1800s or
Yeah,
so.
so
Like, I mean, there's different
I
time
would,
periods
yeah. Well, I would
happened.
imagine that there was no real technology. Like they were probably just doing like bucket brigades back then. They weren't like didn't have fire trucks and they didn't have water hydrants or fire hydrants rather all over the place. Like I don't think that you would see those things if you did everything voluntarily. Um, yeah, I would see that as more individuals as the fire department rather than having a more streamlined fire department. It seems a little bit different. I don't think that there is like a modern day example you could give me. And I just feel like, back in the day we did have an issue where like, I guess you would say there were individuals who had the pockets or rather had the police in their pockets. It's still a problem now, probably. I would say it's less than though. Generally speaking. I just don't see it happening. I think there's too much of a power dynamic of rich people having control over what the police do. Um, because they're literally funding them and they could just say, well, I'm not going to give you any more stuff if you don't give me what I want. And now we're just kind of banking on the uh, rich people being nice to us, whether they want us to be specifically protected or not. And then it gets into a whole idea of like potential abuse. from fire departments because again they're in the pockets of individual people and not the actual entirety of society. So yeah, I just don't think that that would be a good way to be able to handle that.
I could probably try to find like examples of the police. Like a lot of things, in reality are just going to be theory because you can't always have a real world example. But I could try to find that for you and send that to you later if I could find something on that.
Sure.
But I did, and also see if I can find this stuff on like firefighters. But yeah, I mean, there's a libertarian book or answer on pretty much everything. So I think I could probably find it somewhere.
Okay. What would the libertarian answer be to the displacement of jobs and driving down of wages due to technology?
Um, you mean like AI stuff like that?
Yeah.
In general, it's not usually that much of an issue. It's one thing that may exacerbate it, is causing workers to be too expensive and not worth it, right? So, like things like minimum wage, where I
Mhm.
have to pay a worker who may not be worth $15,
Mhm.
and that definitely contributes to things like replacing them with AI.
So
But
based
also,
on
not every instance of like AI or technology is going to replace people. Like
yeah,
ATM machines is the biggest example. People thought they were going to replace bank tellers, but we got more ATMs and we got more bank tellers. And
sure, that's a
certainly,
specific. Well, we did see I think over the last 10 years or so 4 million manufacturing jobs disappear. So I think that if we're going to look at any examples, that would be one of them. Um, it seems like your argument is like, well, people are cheaper than technology right now, so we don't have to worry about it. What happens when technology is more less expensive and they're able to offset regardless of how much you're paying your upper or rather excuse me your worker, because you're already seeing it when you go to really any store. You're seeing self checkouts, you're seeing one person man anywhere to 4 to 8 checkout stations. We're seeing our labor force participation rate is something like 63%, which is very, I would say, very very low. And you're seeing stagnating wages for the past however many decades. So what would the libertarian solution be to that? The hell is ECP?
as far as like automation, like some of the stuff I already mentioned, and then I would say ultimately it's more it's better for the companies themselves to have humans working for them in most areas. Like I think there's definitely areas where the machines are going to be more effective. And I don't know, maybe it changes over time.
I'd
It's
say
just
most areas. Again, like 4
we
million
don't we can't
manufacturing
really say
jobs.
it.
I would say 4 million manufacturing jobs. The existence of Amazon's put down at like 25% of malls. They're closing small businesses. That's like a technology that's streamlining a service directly to your home. Like we're seeing it now, right? And like I do genuinely think we're going to have more and more of an issue. I forgot what I was reading today, but in the next 12 years, we're projected for, I think, I should go back to the website. It might have been a quarter of people losing their jobs. Now, that might be a very intense projection, but I think that it's something to at least consider, that we're rapidly losing jobs, because that also assumes that people who are truck drivers are going to lose their jobs, which I don't really necessarily think that they're going to. Um, Even with automated
Mhm.
trucks. But I do see a stagnation of wages with automated trucks, because you can pay somebody who doesn't really have to drive very much a lot less than you pay somebody who does have to drive. So, like, again, I think we're definitely seeing this issue, and I don't think, of what you have said, I don't think that you've given anything satisfactory that uh, would actually be a solution. Because I
Yeah.
do, we were already seeing automation taking over jobs. Like I do see it's going to be more of a problem. You're going to see a bigger disparity between higher paying jobs and lower paying jobs, because there's going to be fewer mid-tier jobs. I mean, even things like like clerical work for lawyers is getting automated away. So you're going to see fewer people even being able to intern, because it's mostly what they do. I mean, it's going to be
Mhm.
harder for us to develop a lot of these things.
Yeah, I think the issue is like I think we're incentivizing this replacement of jobs a lot right now, and I don't know exactly how different it would look if we weren't doing that. So that's one thing that kind of
what does that mean? Incentivizing the lowering of jobs,
so like the minimum wage I mentioned earlier, for
just in
example, and
general. You said
causing
minimum wage.
like it to be more expensive, causing production to be more expensive through like certain regulations, stuff like that,
Right.
and it's just in unnecessary ways we may be incentivizing that. I don't know exactly how different it would look. And I also haven't really read much into this. I read on a lot of different subjects. I haven't read much into like.
Yeah.
I'm
Right.
sure there's stuff on it, like libertarian answer to like
Yeah, well, I would
automation.
say
I'll definitely get on
I
that.
would say that UBI is the libertarian answer, but no, what you mentioned before is the incentivization to like losing jobs. Hopefully, I said that word right. Like through like minimum wage increases, you could say Obamacare is one of the factors there as well. But then it gets to their jobs being lost somewhere like Mexico, where they have incredibly low wages in general, and now we're getting into a conversation or a position where we're talking about constantly cutting things for people until they're cheap enough to maintain over technology, and that this is just like a fast track to people being abused by corporations. So I don't think that reducing worker protections is necessarily the best way to go when it comes to contextualizing technology. It sounds like the opposite of the best way to go.
Yeah, as far as like some things you mentioned earlier, you talked about like what would I do? Corporations taking advantage of people and stuff like that. Like libertarians are against corporations. That's one thing.
Right.
Like we're not for like, oh, it's just shouldn't exist, but we're not big fans of corporations because we know majority of corporations got there through lobbying and getting subsidies and getting favors from their friends in high places, like Amazon, stuff like that. Jeff Bezos has lobbied for minimum wages that would hurt his competitors, and while using it as like a moral grandstanding, and
So
just
how
stuff
would you
like that.
prevent that? What would you do to prevent that?
So in
This is
those
so
cases,
libertarian, yeah.
there's no way for them to actually lobby the government because the government doesn't have the authority to do these things. So I think
Right.
you would prevent this type of growth. I've got a couple of different
Right.
studies on
Oh,
showing
sure.
how
That makes sense. But
like
then also, we don't have a minimum wage anymore, so they can just kind of pay whatever they want, right?
theoretically, if you don't have any competition, but the thing is we have competition. That's why 98% of people in the US
Sure.
make more than minimum wage. Because like if that was true, then
Right,
we'd
but then
all be
something
making
like
minimum wage.
45% of people live below the poverty line. Something to
Well,
that
yeah,
effect.
the
So that
in
kind,
that case,
the minimum wage is almost irrelevant because right now we're even with minimum wages, we're still seeing people not paid a livable wage, which I would see is an issue in general.
yeah, the poverty lines in like different countries, like you may see people like saying, "Oh, look, this country, which is supposed to be poor, has less people under the poverty line." Well, that's just because of like the way poverty is measured per country. Just because people are in quote unquote poverty in the U.S. doesn't necessarily mean that they're like absolutely struggling. Which I don't want anyone
Right.
living
Well,
in
the poverty line
like
is
that.
$12,000 a year right now, which I don't know if is necessarily livable in really any state.
Yeah, I think it
Um,
just depends on
Yeah,
exactly
well,
where you are.
that's the problem. So, like in relative to like us, that's pretty bad. That poverty line is pretty bad. You're seeing a lot of people not really being able to even afford things like healthcare or even preventative care, which would be some form of healthcare, because they're below the poverty line or at or below the poverty line. So I think that like the poverty line is still a good gauge. I know it's relative to each country, but our poverty line relative to this country is very low, and there's a lot of people on it or on or below it again unnecessarily, I would argue. I say like most people at or below the poverty line in America are like doing very poorly. Like those people are doing very poorly. Like they're living paycheck to paycheck. I forget the statistic. Um,
Yeah, I know a lot of different statistics. I'm not sure exactly
there's
what
a
you
like I
mean.
think it's something like it might be 60% of Americans like would be completely destroyed if they had a like a random $500 um, bill, which is rather common when it comes to your car breaking down or something happening in your house or living space or someone going to the
Mhm.
hospital. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I
no,
actually I actually know like there's two reports that you're kind of referring to. One was $400, and one was like I think it was like 1,200 or 1,100 or something like that.
mhm.
And one good news is each year we've seen a decrease in the number of people who can't afford it. And also like the larger number that people usually cite, which is like 40 to 60%. That's not just the people who would, like what you said, they I forgot the exact wording you used, but like they absolutely would be ruined by it. Um, the people who would absolutely be ruined by it was like a very, very low percentage. That was just people who might have to like borrow or take out a loan, borrow from a family member, but they would still be able to afford it. So that is definitely
Well,
better
it's still
news
not
than,
that's better news, but I
yeah.
wouldn't say it's great news.
It
So,
shouldn't. It should be zero,
right,
obviously, but it is better news.
sure,
We've seen
it's still kind of
improvements
bad
over
though.
the years. Like each year, the number does get lower, which is
Sure,
good. I kind of like that
by
feedback.
how much? What number gets lower exactly?
I think it was like like the overall of people who have trouble affording it was like
Of what is that like?
52%.
Affording what, a $400 bill? Is that what they're saying, or $400
Right.
random?
This would be people who, in order to pay this $400 bill, they're gonna take out a loan or take out of savings or borrow money
Mhm.
from a family member,
And that
something
number
like
goes
that.
down.
Yeah, so it was like
How
52%, and then the next year it's like 50%,
So it seems like it's going
and
down
the next year it's like
roughly. Would you say that
48%.
that's going down due to the fact that
Yeah,
due to
it was like 2 to 3
no, right? But
percent.
how much is that based on inflation and like the value of $400 just being a little less than a few years prior? Um,
Well, this is per year, so I don't think
mhm.
inflation makes that much of a difference
Inflation's about was
through
roughly
like 1 year.
yeah, inflation's roughly 2% a year. So I would say that it seems somewhat in line with it. That's the average inflation increase per year is about 2%. Also, what year did those studies?
Inflation varied. I'm not gonna be able to.
Oh, they
I
certainly
think it was
vary,
like
but the average is about 2%.
2017 or something like that.
Yeah. I just, yeah. As we move forward, we're seeing like I said, we're seeing more class disparity and whatnot, and when wage driving down, I don't think it's entirely. And I do, I absolutely would say that part of it's due to like really irresponsible government choices. I think that there's a huge issue, especially with small businesses having to pay for healthcare for their employees once they get to a certain size, like 10 people, which is impossible for small businesses to do, which prevents small business growth 100%. It's a big issue. It's one of the reasons why Obamacare was kind of like anti-small business in that context. But then that brings us to another conversation about some form of like single payer or universal healthcare system, which I know that you guys find very immoral. Um, the libertarians, at least.
Yeah, didn't you like do a little debate with Alex on that?
I think so. Yeah.
I think
Uh,
he does just debate on the morality rather than like the
yeah.
practicality as much.
What? Yeah. It seems the morality is completely centered around you not, you getting valued for your labor and not having to pay for other people's stuff, which makes, I mean, I guess it makes sense to an extent. I just do believe that, like, as a society, it's better off if we set some kind of a floor for everybody to deal with, and those types of policies have gotten us out of a lot of recessions, like the Great Depression. Um, so I'd say that for if my morality would be generally based off of how good it is for society, and I think that it's pretty demonstrated that social programs in general can be very good for society if implemented correctly. Um, like Social Security.
Yeah, I'm not a consequentialist. I focus more on like either virtue ethics or like the deontology.
Right. Yeah,
Um,
I think people dismiss a lot of.
definitely
You don't think that?
deontologists don't really like completely reject consequentialism all the time. Like
Mhm.
it just like consequentialists don't completely reject deontology.
Sure.
They work within each other, but definitely majority of a
I get that. I understand what you're saying. I
feel
think
like
that for the most
deontology.
part, outcomes are very important because that's what we're looking for, positive outcomes in general. So that's why I guess I'm a consequentialist and
Yeah, but I
that
do work on like
context.
looking at. I know most people are like generically, at least a mild consequentialist. So I do work on like the consequential stuff, like reading different studies and stuff. I've been going over like a ton of studies on like economic freedom, like having more economic freedom and less regulations being
Sure.
like more beneficial to the economy, the poor, racial equality,
Well, I don't think
human
that
rights,
I don't
stuff like
see
that.
where is I don't really think that what did you say? You said a reduction in like welfare programs would lead to like a betterness for the poor.
Well, I mean, like economic freedom in general. Just because
Yeah.
it's like economic freedom doesn't inherently mean there's going to be a reduction in welfare policies. But there's like one. I
Okay.
have some stuff on welfare, like some places like Sweden and
Mhm.
Denmark are more economically free than the
Sure.
U.S., but they have like more welfare. Um, they'll
Right.
have like it'll be like easier to start your business and
Sure.
not be like
Would you be for just a complete
torn
copy of
down
whatever
by
they? Would you be for like whatever copy that they're doing in
I mean,
Sweden?
I would say copy the better areas.
You think
Yeah,
that? Well, they I mean they have
a
healthcare over there.
complete copy, maybe not.
Well, they yeah right. So like, would you be for some because I believe that they have like a universal healthcare system in Sweden.
Yeah, generally all these other countries are gonna have some sort of a
Yeah. Well, I
universal
would
healthcare
imagine it's part
system.
of their success is like universal basic income. I would say it's probably part of their success.
Well, I would
Um,
say their success leads to them being able to have stuff like that. So they have like great financial success, so it's a lot easier for them to actually
well,
like afford these
what does that mean?
systems.
Financial success? Like what specifically like overall
Uh,
governmental financial success or individual financial success?
I would say both, probably.
Yeah.
But
Right.
they have great natural resources, and the
Right.
people generally make more money.
Right. Well, yeah, but
The more
that's a comment. Well, I mean, also, what's their tax bracket like? Because I believe it's much higher than ours.
Oh
Um,
yeah, well, most of those countries usually have
yeah. So like
higher taxes.
all those positives have to do with more government control. It sounds like we're talking about at this point. Like they're directly linked to more government control. Like income disparity is directly linked to like the government having a large say in the amount of money that individuals can and can't make to reduce those disparities.
I mean, if you it kind of depends. You kind of have to look at like the history of the country itself, and like a lot of different factors play
Well,
into it.
I know we have the largest wealth disparity out of any first world country, so I would imagine that that's a big issue as to why people make less money because there's a lot of wealth hoarding in the United States. Absolutely rampant wealth hoarding. You wouldn't
In the
be
U
for some kind of wealth redistribution.
in the U.S. specifically, states that do more wealth redistribution and do more to reduce wealth inequality actually end up exacerbating it. Let me see if I
Right.
have this on hand. Where is it? It's in my communist debate. Where is it? This is a very interesting study. And actually, a little after this, I'm gonna have to go. It's getting kind of late.
Yeah, no problem, dude. No problem. No problem.
And I gave you plenty of stuff to read.
Yeah, I know. I
But
hate
let me
reading.
see.
You're fucking me up today, dude. You're fucking me up while I was reading. Because
I
I
hate
mean, because
reading too, but I do a
you
lot of it.
yeah, no, I get that. Because you had mentioned again, like you're like, oh, there's states where they do a poor job at wealth redistribution, but every other country does a good job at it. So I would imagine it's just our particular fashion of wealth redistribution, which I would say is a welfare trap that actually is more of an issue than anything else. I wouldn't say it's inherently welfare. It would be the types of welfare that are implemented. But
Where is it?
like for instance, I think Obamacare was well intentioned, but ended up having like a negative effect because I believe it subsidizes what is it, privatized healthcare, which is kind of an issue rather than streamlining it. And I'm not somebody who thinks that we should have. I think that we should have a government. We should definitely have a private option, but
Copy link. There you go. This one kind of looks at the different states themselves.
mhm.
And there's different data showing like more economically free countries will usually have more income
Right. But
equality,
again, those economically
and
free countries, those economically free countries also have like robust welfare systems that are just more effective than ours, and they also have better wealth redistribution and like a better tax rate. So I would say, like, if we're going to look at those countries and say, hey, there's a big positive in their economic freedom, we also need to look at part of why that is. And I would say it's because there's a more robust middle class and less income disparity and wealth disparity. I don't think that you can remove, I don't think that you can remove that from the equation of success. It seems like it's just our form of welfare is rather poor.
I definitely think you should look at it and consider everything.
Oh no, I'm
I was
going
gonna
to,
say
but I
how
mean,
many,
all I'm
like,
saying is like there's like what I don't know how many first world countries there are, but every single one of them has, they're more progressive than us and they're more successful than us, and we are the richest country in the world. We have like a $25 trillion economy. It's not that we can't afford these things. I think it's just that we don't want to consider affording them in the proper way. Because like I'm gonna read it, but like I mean I'm sure that there's issues, but just from what I said, like there's still the factor that all these countries that you're pointing to of success are more, I guess you'd say, quote unquote, socialist than us, and they're more successful than us. Um, yeah, I mean, maybe part of that's because they're more of an ethno state. I don't know. That's a unique problem to the United States. I'm totally not for like a white only thing. It's just an issue that we have to contextualize, and part of that is obviously, I mean, my opinion is wealth redistribution in some capacity.
yeah, I mean, people say that they're like, oh, well, this country has more white people, but I mean, it does contribute to a certain extent.
Yeah, it does. I
It's
just
just
don't.
kind
As
of
long as
yeah,
your solution isn't let's just get rid of the black people, like it is something
right.
that's to acknowledge. But yeah, no,
Because different populations have different health outcomes and just lots
yeah.
of different stuff.
Well, I
Yeah.
wouldn't say that it's well. What do you think that like? Well, I mean, we're getting into a whole conversation. I don't think that it's necessarily the populations. I think it's more of like the resources available to particular populations. I mean, I know that we don't want to get into a conversation about systemic racism. We don't have to, but like black people are just generally substantially more poor, and so obviously that would lead to much different health outcomes. Um,
Oh yeah, I just mean like within comparable groups, right? So
mhm.
you have these comparable groups with comparable incomes, and they're like this group is a different race, and then this group is from a different country. They're like the same quote unquote race, but they're from a different country, from a different culture. Like
Mhm.
cultures themselves, even if it's the same
Oh well,
races,
yeah. I think
quote
that we're getting
unquote,
into
there's
like
like very huge difference as well.
yeah, well, that's yeah, no, absolutely. Like, I mean, I would imagine just right off the bat, like a more Americans in general eat very unhealthy comparatively, and part of that's linked to I would say part of that's linked to a less traditional household. If we really want to get into it, where the woman works as well, and I'm not for a more traditional household per se, but it's something to consider where you don't have somebody at home making dinner, and then also kids are lazy. American kids are lazy; they don't want to make their own food. They go to fucking Applebee's every goddamn night.
And if like a Swedish person comes to the US, they're going to be more happy and they're still going to have, better outcomes because even though they're living in the same place, they're going to be living their own style still.
Sure. Yeah. No, I completely
Yeah.
agree. That's why people. That's why I always say this. I guess immigrant like black immigrants. The reason I stutter is because a lot of people from these African countries hate to be called black, but they pretend to outperform native black Americans, and part of that absolutely is culture. Now, of course, I always like to contextualize that culture, in my opinion, would be a derivative of some form of systemic racism, denying opportunity. I don't know if that
Okay,
you
and
take.
like
Yeah,
Nigerians are very
do very
successful in
well.
the
Yeah,
US.
absolutely, they do fantastic. Good for them. Part of it too is because they benefit from what the hell is it called? What's the word I'm looking for? Um, what the hell is it? Affirmative action, which I think is an issue kind of with affirmative action, that it doesn't go to the people who necessarily need it. I would argue that people coming over from Nigeria aren't really victims of systemic racism. So like that, we're not even targeting the correct group. I don't even know if we've seen an expansion of wealth within Native Black communities at all due to affirmative action. White women
Yeah, there's
benefit a
there's
lot.
definitely like lots of different factors that go into these things, even down to like the ages. I don't know the average age of like a
Sure, yeah,
Nigerian that comes over, but if it is an older age, then that definitely contributes to it. Like that's
that's very
one
true.
thing that contributes a little bit to the gap in blacks and whites and Asians in the U.S. That's definitely doesn't account for all of it by any
No,
means,
well,
but
it
that's
kind of
definitely
gets into a
a factor.
conversation. It's a great point because it gets into a conversation about how many there's so many specific factors that we get to a point where we have to stop. We have to kind of get to this point where, regardless of whether libertarian or not, but get to the point where we understand that like micromanaging things doesn't work. Like, you want to like affirmative action. I mean, I'd say it probably worked overall, kind of, but I would say that it's micromanaging and there are better streamlined solutions. And like, not to pivot back to UBI, but that's why I'm for UBI over like all these different systems and programs, because there's no way that the government can take into account the 100 different identities that can contribute to whether you're successful or not. So there's no reason for them to try. That's the micromanage. I hate micromanaging. That's where I come from, that perspective, because I used to work. I used to be a manager for a bus company, and micromanaging was rampant. Simply put, I do believe overall, it's probably something we can agree with, that the government doesn't know what the government knows less. You know better how to deal with your money than the government does.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm for like a UBI over welfare, because I get to I get the money back to some extent.
If you really want to have a good debate on UBI and the actual like policies, then I would say I have a friend, Alex,
He's
not the
this
Alex you
stick
talked to, but
man.
another Alex.
Isn't that stick man? No.
No,
Oh,
he wanted to talk to you about it too. I'm not sure how good he is on it. I know he's definitely a very smart dude, but like I've never seen him debate on UBI or anything or make like a doc on it.
sure.
I know Alex made like a whole document on it because he was gonna debate two guys who are on TikTok who are like really big with UBI, and they were doing like UBI debates, but that never happened. That was kind of sad. That would have been like a huge, like, really good debate on UBI.
Hmm.
But he might be interested. He's not a very big creator himself, but
Yeah,
like
that's
it's still, if you ever want to have him on, that's definitely a possibility. If you would have like a really good debate on UBI.
maybe. Yeah, no, I don't even mean to be like a fucking shill or whatever, but like I try to get people with like at least 30K on TikTok before they come on.
Hmm.
Not to,
Yeah,
just so that I know that they're a little bit reputable and whatnot.
yeah, I
Um,
definitely, yeah,
you
that
know,
definitely makes sense.
but I actually have to finally go over. I have a stream set for tomorrow where I actually talk about UBI and like the pros and cons of it. Um, Yeah, I have a tomorrow finally, because I never actually get to it. I always say I'm gonna do it. I try to do it, but I'm not prepared. There's just so much to go through when it comes to it. But yeah, no. And again, I don't like debates. Like I've had a couple conversations that end up getting like out of control. I'm trying to reel that in a little bit. So I hate debate style. Like tonight, like I didn't want to be like a dick because like there's no real reason to be. I think we had a nice conversation. It was nice and calm. We just had disagreements. I think it's fair.
Oh yeah, I definitely prefer like the conversations more than the like
Yeah.
big debates. Like I debated Vosh. I don't know if you knew that.
Oh, did
He's
you?
like a big like fiery debater and stuff, and
Yeah, I had a
a lot of people
conversation with
like going back
Vosh.
and forth. But me
Yeah.
and him just like talked. We did an
Where?
abortion debate and we talked the
Oh
whole
yeah,
time.
yeah, yeah. He's.
And everyone said it was really good.
I had a conversation with him, but it wasn't heated at all. He was just basically asking me why I make fun of young kids or something, because that was back when I was doing a lot. I was like, young kids say dumb shit. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, I think I watched that stream on his
uh, my
his
only regret is
YouTube.
I didn't actually like get it myself. I didn't stream it. That was very early into my streaming career, so I didn't have anything on it. And like Vosh is like banned from Twitch, so I didn't set up my YouTube. I was like, it won't be a big deal. But you
Yeah,
live and you learn. But he said Happy Thanksgiving to me. He's a nice guy. He's a little weird. I think he said something about pedophilia not being such a big deal. It's a little bizarre. Whatever. And lost in the sauce, I say. Lost in the fucking sauce on that one.
yeah. I've been trying to get him to do like a good capitalism debate against someone I know who's like really, really smart on
Yeah,
economics.
he seems to change his perspective based on who he's arguing with, because I had a conversation with him and I mentioned UBI and he's like, oh, so you're like basically I don't know if he's like a, what would you call it, stinky head, what the fuck are they called, anarchist, there you go. But like he was definitely for like a slow transition to potentially hitting communism. But I've seen some fiery debates with people. I don't know, maybe maybe he's just bipolar. I have no fucking idea.
Yeah, I know he wants communism ultimately, but I think he just doesn't think it's realistic. And then he wants like market socialism.
That's fair.
And
Yeah, I don't think communism is
I think
realistic
it's an
either.
anarchist. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think
Lester Hurd
it's.
was an anarchist,
Oh,
like an
really.
anarcho-syndicalist.
Yeah, so he's a smarty poo. Yeah, that's fair. Like that's one of the I had that conversation with like a young. It got too it got too intense because he just kept dodging questions, and I get annoyed. But I kept like I basically just kept. There's a meme going around, very small meme that's like I was like, hey, how do you pay people in communism? And like that was the one time that I meant to ask, how do you value people who are more valuable to society in communism? But I just said pay, and everybody's like, oh, look, he doesn't get communism. It's like, well, I had to press him for a half hour just for him to say maybe people could give them a better house, and I was like, well, nobody's gonna go through. Nobody's gonna be a doctor for 12 years if they can get the same pay as like a fucking janitor. I would argue there's probably less freedom in a communist system than like a non-communist system, especially since you're going to halt progress the second that you implement like anarchist communism.
Yeah, when I'm debating communists, sometimes I like just bring up like the super basic arguments
Yeah,
that they
no,
never
it's
really thought of. Like
it,
sometimes it's just like, who would work in the sewers, or like why would someone work in the
yeah,
sewers? And they're just
no,
like,
for sure.
there's plenty of people who have responses to it, but sometimes it's just funny when you get like a smarty pants who just has no response to this super basic
Yeah,
question.
no, and then they're like, well, I have this, like they're like, well, let me go through the thing. It's like, no, I don't. Like the problem with a lot of theorists, and I think that it's not just communists, it's communists. I think that part of them are critical, like race theorists, gender theorists. They always ignore common sense arguments, and they still build their platform by like ignoring very like commonsensical arguments. And then like they're just like, no, 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 like let's move past. It's like, well, how am I going to move past? Like I asked them another simple question, like how do you get in a communist system? How do you get people to go towards the jobs that they want, like that are necessary for society? And they're just like I don't know. It's like, well, that's a huge issue that capitalism has sorted out. So like you need to have that answer. You can't gloss over a huge one. It's a big one. It's a huge fucking problem. People don't understand that, but like in a communist society, I don't really see like that's part of the incentive program. And then also I come from a place where there's people just better than other people. Like if you're better than somebody else, you deserve more. How much more is a conversation to have, but you still deserve more if you're better. If you're a fucking doctor, like you're more valuable to society than a fast food worker. So we should encourage people to become doctors because we need those, and we need good doctors so that people don't die.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyway, I know you probably have to get off, and I've been chatting your ear off for the past, I don't even know how fucking long I've been talking to you. For a while.
Oh yeah, it's getting kind of late. But yeah, I'll make sure I read something on like libertarians and automation. That might be pretty interesting. It's not something I've looked
Yeah,
much into in the past. I've looked into like how many jobs we might like how many new jobs we would have because
yeah.
like over like 20 years you're gonna have jobs people never even thought of and stuff
Sure,
like
but I
that.
would say
But
that there's
I
not
really
going to
want to
be
look into like
there's not going to be as many of them though, because like just for context, labor force participation rate back in the 90s I think was 90%. Now we're down to 63%. So like there's substantially less people
Mhm.
participating in the labor force. I think that it's a big factor. Um,
Yeah.
but like I think Ben Shapiro is libertarian. Isn't I correct about that?
Relatively, yeah.
Yeah, because he was like,
I'm
oh,
not
I
gonna
just don't.
class
He was like,
but
oh, I just think it's too early. Like that's his whole argument. I mean, I disagree. But like that's his whole argument. So I don't know if what the other libertarian solution. I would just say like honestly, UBI sounds more libertarian to me than any other projected solution. Maybe one day
yeah, I
I'll
think
get
it's more
you.
libertarian than like welfare, definitely.
Yeah, see, gonna get you one day.
And then negative income tax would be more libertarian than UBI. I don't know if you know much
You
about
you
negative
think
income
so?
tax.
You really think so? I know
Yeah, I
about
would
it.
think
It's a,
so.
no. I think that like I think that negative income tax is like better than welfare for sure, 100%. But I would argue that like it still has a similar trap because it's like based on how much money you make. So like
Mhm.
you could play the line between getting money and not, so it doesn't really incentivize people to do better. Whereas a UBI, it's unconditional money, so you know if you do better, you'll get more still. And it also deals with the issue of like lowering wages in a lot of jobs as well. I think it's just more comprehensive. I would totally, if somebody said negative income tax or nothing, I would totally be for a negative income tax over a welfare system. But I just think that UBI is better.
Mhm.
So that's just my thing. But like Milton Friedman was a big negative income tax guy.
Yeah, I think he was the one that basically invented it.
Yeah, these all these libertarians coming up with better solutions, huh?
Yep. And he did the whole like taxing carbon
Not bad,
emissions
man. How's
and
yours?
stuff like that.
You think we should tax carbon emissions?
Yeah, that was his idea.
Oh, you don't believe in
More
that?
funds for the government. I think I can go with it. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, very good. Very good. I think we need to
It's,
focus
if you
on India and
do it
China
like
not
based
polluting as
off,
much.
if you do it based off of like private property rights, then it's acceptable to me.
What about a? Oh, okay. What about a sugar tax? Would you be okay for people taxing Oreos more?
No.
I would. We have a fat fucking country, honestly. I think that if we have a conversation about making universal health care, we need to have a conversation about how obese people are, like myself, because it's not a positive thing for the economy if we're gonna do that. There's something that nobody ever contextualizes is how fucking fat we are as a country compared to a lot of these other socialist countries. It's a huge issue. It's a huge fucking issue.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons why I think that like that's why I feel like if we did do universal healthcare, we would have to implement that and incentivize people to like cook more of their food rather than just get fucking McDonald's. I honestly think that a sugar tax and a fast food tax are things that we definitely need to coincide with what the hell is it? With some form of universal healthcare. I think that obesity is worse than cigarettes, honestly.
I think a more libertarian solution would probably be if you have like more competition, then you're gonna incentivize certain restaurants or food producers and whatnot to have more like innovations on like, okay, now we're able to bring you this healthier food. Like we've even seen that bit in fast food restaurants in the past decades, them making more strides towards fresher
Yeah,
stuff
I
and
don't know
creating,
exactly
like,
why that is.
cooking them.
But even like the Impossible Burger, I know you're referencing like white meat chicken nuggets for sure, but I don't even think that's something the Impossible Burger is still very unhealthy because it's the preservatives that are more of an issue than the type of meat per se.
The Impossible Burger was nasty.
Yeah, it's also I can't imagine it's that good for you.
I got a free one because I was dating a girl who was a vegan, and I was like, yeah, I'll try. She wasn't like a vegan for like moral reasons. It was just like health. She couldn't eat meat without getting sick. But I'm
Right.
like, I want to try eating something vegan since I'm dating a vegan. And I got it. I'm just like, this is disgusting.
Dated a vegan. What the fuck? I'm actually gonna think I'm gonna do I'm gonna do like a mukbang stream and I'm gonna eat vegan food and like probably throw up, honestly. See how it goes though. I gotta do something.
Yeah, they're like, oh, it tastes exactly the same, guys. Trust me.
Yeah, well, if it's right. Jesus, maybe I'll have that vegan tea.
There's a
Maybe
new
if
milk they put out, right?
what happened?
Isn't there like a new milk where they're like, it tastes exactly
Yeah,
like milk?
doubt
but
it.
it's
Milk
not.
is
It's
apparently
vegan milk.
really bad for you though.
Like I don't even have to taste it, man.
Yeah,
I
no.
know it's not. It doesn't taste the same.
No, it doesn't. But milk is like really bad for you. Apparently, like dairy products are not good for you. I was watching some video. I should have saved the video and like watched it through. But there's like some professor talking about how milk really is not very good for you, and we should cut it out of our diets.
Yeah,
I haven't, but I'm working towards it. It's very high in like there's a lot of dairy like sugar in it. That's weird. It's bizarre. But it's only bad for big chunksters. So.
juice has a lot of sugar in it.
What's that?
I just realized that juice has a lot of sugar in it.
Yeah,
I just realized that.
I try to
Almost
just.
as much as
Dude, it's bad. I try to just I try to specifically drink water and like very 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 like watered down iced teas, like where I take like a packet meant for a water bottle and put it in like a gallon just to get that taste out of my mouth, That's like my biggest thing is like who the fuck wants to drink who wants to drink that in the morning? Like I can't handle my own morning breath in the morning, you know what I mean? It's disgusting. No, WoW's not that hard to get into.
All right, well, I'm gonna go ahead and head off now.
Yeah, take care, man. It was a nice conversation. I'm sorry I threw you off. Thank you so much, guys, to all my Patreons, and a special shout out to my Papa XL Patreons. Without all you guys, I would just be some fat dude screaming into a microphone. So thank you so much, guys. Mwah, I love you all. I want Papa Gut to pee on my face, but just as a friend. There's nothing weird about that. I want him to pee on my face.